But we are honored to have Grace joining us. So Grace is a registered architect and sustainability strategist who bridges technical design precision with high-level sustainability and resiliency goals. At Revision Architecture, she consults on sustainable building projects of all sizes, from concept through construction, specializing in certifications such as LEED, Building Challenge, and WELL. With a Bachelor of Architecture from Virginia Tech and a minor in environmental policy and planning, Grace has previously held project architects roles at firms including Gensler and ENV, contributing to academic, hospitality, retail, and commercial projects. Today, Grace will be exploring how resiliency is integrated into major sustainability rating systems, highlighting key trends, available tools, and how frameworks like LEED and LBC are evolving to support resilient design. We're really excited to have her with us today.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you. So we're going to run through this presentation talking about building rating systems, and I'm hoping this proves valuable. So let me try and pivot my brain to Google Meet. And Karen knows this is my strong suit.
It's no one's strong suit.
Okay.
You want me to walk you through it, let me know. Okay.
We're doing it. Amazing. Okay. Great. Okay. So let me just get myself in gear. All right, we're talking about resiliency through the lens of building rating systems. Karen just gave me a fantastic intro, so I don't really need to say much more, but yes, I'm going to talk about my alphabet soup just for a minute, I suppose. So registered architect, as you just heard, I had kind of a previous career doing as a project architect, working on design in a more direct way, I would say. I'm also a LEED accredited professional, so talk to me about your LEED stuff, Living Future, and then True Advisor, which, what is that one? Well, we're not really going to talk about that one too much today, but True is basically the zero waste certification, and so I try and live as zero waste as possible. It's trash day right now, and we've been on trash strike for like who knows how long the trash hasn't picked up, and my husband and I actually didn't even put out trash, even though today is the first day it's back, because we produce so little. So I think about waste streams a lot, and I will talk about that a little bit today. That's not the main point. So revision architecture, we're here to remove barriers to green buildings and sustainable communities. So as Karen was getting into, so I worked for like 5 years at a medium-sized architecture company, and then 2 years in a really big architecture company in New York City. And then during the pandemic, I kind of was thinking about what brought me joy and what excited me. And I realized the parts of my job as an architect where I was leading conversations about sustainability were the things that got me the most jazzed. So I pivoted and tried to find an opportunity where I could just talk about sustainability all day. And at first I was like, well, we should just design buildings to be sustainable, period. We don't need to do rating systems. That seems like a little bit of extra work. I have to tell you, I worked on LEED projects as an architect. I'm obviously working on lots of LEED projects right now as a sustainability consultant. And here's my pitch to you about why we should look at this conversation through the lens of rating systems or building standards or certifications, however you want to phrase it. There's just good content there. There's a lot. All of these have big books of standards and reference guides, but they're written by specialists. These are peer-reviewed best practices that these rating systems are coming up with. They're not just me saying these are things that would be a good idea. They are good ideas, and there's citation, right? And so even if you end up not using any of the rating systems we're talking about today, the concepts that are embedded within each of these are good tools. They're tools to do good. They are kind of the same reason that you do ADA, right? Or that you have different codes. These are kind of written down guidelines and codes for, like I just said, sustainability, right? We have building codes for health, safety, and welfare, right? These rating systems, the ones we're going to talk about today, in general, are kind of codes for sustainability or wellness. And the reason why I would also advocate for doing is accountability, right? We are busy. I'm talking to an audience of architects, and there's a lot going on, right? We are doing a million things at once and managing a bunch of other people. And so if something is not a priority, then it might be off the table. And so by prioritizing through kind of the carrot and stick of a rating system, then you are, adding that layer of accountability and check to your project. And like I said, these things are third-party verified. So maybe your engineer is saying they're going to do something, but then we have this validation through the process that I find just brings a lot of value to what we're talking about. So I promise we'll get into more nitty-gritty, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page when we're talking about green building certifications. So we have LEED, which is the one, if you haven't heard of any green building certifications, LEED is probably the one that you have heard of, right? So LEED is pretty broad. It's also industry standard and globally recognized. So you see the plaques, you're walking down the street. LEED is kind of our powerhouse that's the most popular, we'll say. We have Passive House. I know there's a bunch of people on this call who do Passive House, and there's been seminars on Passive House as its own thing for sure. So I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds, but Passive House is more energy focused. It's deeper and pretty technical, as opposed to we're just talking about LEED, which again is pretty broad and a little bit more optionality. Living Building Challenge, or LBC, very holistic, also very deep and performance-based. So someone's coming back, we have a performance period, right? We are validating through really on-site testing. And the last one we're adding here is WELL, which is more about the health, well-being of the occupants, I would say, less so than the built environment. It all comes together. You need to have, your architecture team coordinating for the design of the building to allow for the health and well-being of your users. But it's less, it's just like a little bit, we're not going to be lingering on WELL for the resiliency conversation. But that one's also performance-based, which I find interesting. There's also a WELL performance testing agent who comes out and validates that you are, like your air is operating the way you intend it to, your water. So there's a lot there. Quickly, the things I just said, I'm just going to reiterate. LEED, right, is scorecard-based, and there's a small number of prerequisites and then a lot of optionality. So there's a lot of points and credits that you can pursue. And I'd argue, which I will throughout this presentation, that almost any of these sustainability strategies that are pinpointed here and broken out into kind of a manageable, digestible format could contribute to resiliency in some way because, right, if we're using less energy, that's resilient in times of peak load demand, right? If we're using less water, again, that's a resiliency strategy. So sustainability and resiliency, to me, are pretty synonymous. LEED version 5 is coming out. Well, it is out. If you don't know, LEED version 5 was out in April, and so they actually are shifting more towards resiliency, and it's more prioritized in this version. So when we talk through some unique strategies, I'm going to be focusing on LEED version 5. Passive House, like we talked about, right, is less of a scorecard based, more of a guidelines and standards. But there's a lot of benefits, and a lot of the things that LBC has to offer and LEED and other things want you to kind of think through some Passive House strategies too. Passive House provides a lot of great strategies. That can be a Living Building Challenge. This is just another example of what that scorecard looks like. There's a lot here. I don't expect you to memorize all, but I want you to kind of get the broad understanding of the different frameworks. So living building challenge breaks things down into place, water, energy, health and happiness. And if we're going for full living building challenge, it's less of a la carte menu, the way that maybe LEAD is, where you kind of pick and choose your strategies. We're going for full living building challenge. I'm focusing here on this new building column because we're going to be talking about new buildings generally today and commercial buildings. Then you're basically doing all of these things. And then, well, we just talked about also a decent amount of free conditions, but then a huge amount of options. And so the reason why I am showing you all these different scorecards is because I want you to know these different resources that you could kind of just pick up at any given time. There's just a lot of, like I said, crowdsourced, peer-reviewed, great research that people have already done. So if you are curious about something and you're wondering what experts are saying, instead of maybe asking ChatGPT, you're welcome to do that too. But also there's other people who've already consolidated that information for you. And then our office put this together for a different presentation, and I stole it for today, but this is just a graphic that's kind of making evident what I was just talking about. So LEAD, we have a lot of options through these main categories, and then pass fail goes really deep here. LBC, we'd argue, is deep on a lot of different items, and then WELL is maybe focused on community and health and well-being, but has some trickle of thinking about water. And, oh yeah, a lot of indoor environmental quality. Okay. One other thing. This is not a site and presentation. I just sat in on a beautiful site presentation a few months ago. Site is important. There is a rating system for that if you really want to get into it too. Sites version 2, that's not my wheelhouse necessarily. There's other people in my office, I'm sure, who could talk to you about it more. But this is an AIA meeting. We're talking more building, less site. But it all comes together in the soup, in the jazz that is coming to a design project, right? So you should be talking to your civil and your landscape team about your site. And here's an example of what that scorecard looks like. All right. Since I have an opportunity to talk to a room of designers, and I might work with you in the future, you might work with a sustainability consultant, or you might be the sustainability leader on your team, the thing I want you to do is start early. All of these certifications, these concepts, these strategies, anything, as you know, the earlier we embed that into our design process and make it inherent to our project, these different targets that we're going for, the more likely they are to be interwoven in, right? As you know, it's a lot more expensive for last minute changes if the client is asking for something later than it is if you make it the basis of your design. So I like this little curve. It just shows where I want us to be thinking of things. I'd argue I'd like this red curve to be even further to the left. I want us to be thinking of these things as soon as possible, but I hope this is illustrating my intent. Okay, so like I just said, LEAD version 5 and LBC are what we're going to be kind of pinpointing today. I took some select credits from, or petals, or imperatives, whatever. There's a lot of different lingo. Don't worry about that. Think about the strategies. And so I took a few select items that to me screamed resiliency in a more blatant way. Again, a lot of sustainability is resiliency. You should be thinking about anything that's coming into your building, your energy, your water, your food in some capacity, and then how you sustain yourself. I'd argue all of that is resiliency. But for today's purposes, for LEAD version 5, they have reorganized and reprioritized a bunch of the things that you used to know. And so we're going to start with integrative process. There used to just be one integrated process, and now they've broken it out into multiple different prereqs. These are prereqs, the integrative process on the top. You have to start out your project, again, starting early, you need to start out your project as informed as possible. And we're going to talk about climate resilience. So they have a whole climate resilience assessment prerequisite, and then that kind of trickles down. They ask you to do these assessments early on, and then they inform other credits and other items throughout the process. So let's start with climate resilience assessment. Right now, you could go to LEED version 5, just Google it, and their whole reference guide, the big PDF, is available for free. You don't need to be anyone special. You don't need to pay any money. You can get all of this information for free. And when you're on the credit library, if you've been on this before, I spent a lot of time on the credit library, you go to resources and tips, and you can download, there's this Excel template they've put together for you. And it breaks down basically all these different hazards they want you to do a preliminary assessment on, and then determine what are your highest priority hazards for your project, your area, and your type, right? And what's great is they've done it for you in that they've set together a framework for you to have these questions, and they have suggestions for design design solutions, if you will, right? So they ask you, are you in a place that could have drought, earthquake, extreme cold, right? We're getting more extreme weather these days. Extreme heat, they have a different solution, maybe a different way of thinking about your envelope, right? Or the way your HVAC system operates in extreme heat versus extreme cold. Do you have both? Flooding, is flooding a priority in where your building is? Wildfires are happening more and more often, and maybe for us, wildfire smoke, right? I took this picture a few years ago, right when I was in New York City working at, and right, so that was crazy. We were all wearing masks, and then I was like, these windows, I don't know if they're sealing out the air. Are we thinking about our infiltration rate? Are we thinking about there's a variety of ways to mitigate and manage major events. So the climate resilience assessment prerequisite reminder wants you to look at all of the different potential hazards and then identify 2 at a minimum to address through different proposed design strategies. So you're doing this whole hazard assessment or climate resilience assessment, and then you're identifying the major ones. It's not expected that you're attending to necessarily every single thing, but the 2 largest ones. And then we're going to provide a narrative and then also implement what is, we're near flooding. Okay, well, they're going to raise the building's foundation. We're going to have all critical facilities nowhere near the flood region, right? Or we're in a drought-prone area. Can we operate if we run the grid? If the system runs out of water, are we using as little water as possible with our plumbing fixtures? This is all resilient strategies. Then the other couple credits that I found fun is enhanced resilience site design. Again, this is a new credit, and this kind of is another thing where you can take credit or points for what you've done in this prerequisite. And so they actually, if I had more time, I was going to even show you this. Just go to LEED version 5. Look at this credit, enhanced resilience site design. They literally list out different suggested strategies for these different priority hazards. And there's a lot of good stuff there. So in that same vein, let me just say, for instance, they're talking about, like I just said, flooding. They have a bunch of suggestions for that. If you're in a hail region, how do you fortify your structure? Resilient space is very similar, but this is more the architecture and your operation of the building. And so some of the things they are pinpointing with, again, citations to the ASHRAE Guideline 44 for episodic outdoor ambient conditions. If there's wildfire smoke or bad indoor air quality, I think by virtue of having this series, we are recognizing that we are in a period of catastrophic climate change, and it is impacting the way we breathe and operate through life, right? And so in order to be resilient, we need to be future thinking and kind of worst case scenario protecting, if that's a word. So we have, for respiratory disease, if we're in a moment of distress in that way? How are we cleaning our air? Thermal safety during power outages. I thought this one was interesting. They have guidelines for thermal modeling, right? Consider extreme heat conditions. How is our building resilient in that situation? For extreme cold, they said you could do thermal modeling or just get Passive House certified. You've thought about extreme cold. And then strategies such as just operable windows. Are we in a place where the power goes off and it's really, really hot? And you can't even open your windows during a heat wave or a power outage. So again, that. And then fundamental air quality. I've been harping on that. I find that one really important. But your old minimum IAQ, indoor air quality credit prerequisite, is now called fundamental air quality. And it's relatively similar, except for the ASHRAE standard has been increased, and you now need to take into account your regional and local air quality. So do an investigation again, and then design to it. Do you need extra filtration than you normally would? Is there a lot of smog in your area? And then my last one for the lead before I jump to the LBC strategies I want you to remember is, this one's funny, I just added this one. It might be a stretch, but I would argue not, because resiliency, like I just said, I'm looking at trash piles outside my window right now. Being able in a time of crisis to, self-sustain and allow people to habit your building healthily, zero waste is something to consider. So we got our standards, our e-waste and batteries, our paper, metal, plastic, cardboard, glass. Version 5 is now requiring also composting, right? So that's also, my composting was been picked up once a week during this past month. No problem. That was most of my trash, right? So composting is a great way for us to reduce our things going to landfill. And then zero waste operations planning, too, is now, again, a prerequisite. So when you're thinking about waste, this is kind of their hierarchy. I think you've all seen this before: reduce, reuse, recycle. So reduce to start. As architects, we don't always have the most control over what the owner brings into our space, but I think there's a responsibility to have those conversations. If appropriate, there's, like, for instance, working on a school cafeteria, or there's an arena where the owner controls everything that's coming in, right? You have an opportunity to think through where those items that are coming into the building are going. So design details. Are you designing a room to hold onto your trash or your compost? Are you designing millwork details to allow people to sort things correctly? These are things that I find pretty fun. Okay, where are we at with time, Karen? We're good? That was lead version 5. I'm going to spend a little bit more and then just jump to LBC. So that was the strategies for resiliency in lead that I'm excited about. And then Living Building Challenge has a lot going on. I would argue a lot of it is basically resilient because it kind of wants you to be able to be pretty independent as a building. But the imperatives 2, 6, and 8, I thought added some beautiful language that were really on the nose about resiliency. So we have the place pedal, which has a bunch of different resilience strategies. A lot of them are site related, which we've had a decent amount of conversations. So this on-site food production and food storage, that's interesting. So all projects must provide access to food for 75% of full-time equivalents. So, you have 100 workers at your office building, making it really simple. So you need to have enough food for 75 of them for 3 days during an emergency, right? We have a wild snowstorm. I can't get home. I'm stuck in the office, right? Like, how am I sustaining? So we need to have food. So then as a designer, you need to start thinking about where that's going to go. How are people going to access it, right? In a moment of crisis, essentially. Residential is a little bit different. They want you to store at least a 2-week supply of food. And you might be asking yourself, do I know how much food for a day? What I eat is very different than what someone else eats in a day. 2,100 nutritious calories per person per day is how they've quantified it. Again, like I keep on saying, what I like about these rating systems is that they provide you kind of clear guidance on what's the appropriate response to something. So I don't need to guess, well, I like to eat a Chipotle burrito every day, and this other person doesn't. 2,100 calories per person per day. The next one, water, is very important for us to be resilient, right? And so similar to the food one, but we want to provide drinking water for up to a week for all regular building occupants through water storage on site. And what is that? It's 1 gallon per FTE per occupant, so 100 gallons per day for a week. 700 gallons, right? For that same office building. So you need to be thinking through, where is that being stored? In what capacity? Are these jugs? Is this a cistern? Do we have a cleaning system? How does that pump work if we're out of energy, right? There's a lot. It's not just these two lines. There's a lot of thought work and design work that goes into making this implementable. So you want to think about it early and make it known to, your stakeholders or have the conversation early and say, how are we going to make this happen, right? And make sure that you get the ownership on board for all these different items. It requires kind of early integration. And the last one is the energy pedal, particularly energy resilience. And so the way that LBC considers resilience in this lens is you need to allow the building to be habitable for 1 week. There's a couple there's like any rating system, there's kind of caveats and other pathways you can consider this. But let's go with a habitable for 1 week. So what does that mean? Depends on your project. Habitable depends on your occupancy type, where your climate is. It does not need to be 72 degrees and humidity free in the moment of resilience, but it needs to be habitable. So you need to think more about what are our comfort ranges in an emergency event, and talk to your team. Is there passive strategies, right? Is our building so airtight and so insulated that the energy from when the systems were fully operating previously is kind of maintaining, and we are not getting tons of heat or cooling loss? Or is our envelope doing something different, and we need to have batteries and on-site energy production so that our building can operate as intended? Are we a restaurant or a cafeteria or something that has refrigeration as an important process load? Are we thinking about that now? Or are we, multifamily unit where there's children and stuff? So everything is different, but the best practice would be allow the building to be habitable for 1 week in case of emergency. And you get to decide what that means to you. And you're seeing here, we just talked about there's a climate resilience assessment for LEED, right? So we know that gives us a tool and a framework for talking about what we think are the major hazards. Then LBC gives you strategies for implementing resiliency in a different way too. So I think these all speak to one another in an interesting way and all coordinate. So in almost conclusion, there's a bunch of different rating standards, and the one you choose really will help guide your conversation with your whole design team and your ownership, right? So think about your project type, think about what the goals are, and use these different tools and resources that have already been written out for you, and then there's a lot there. And the other thing am I still sharing, Karen?
No, you just closed out.
Start early is my last slide that I was going to share. Start early, and you will embed and enmesh these principles in a really thoughtful way that I think will last and be resilient through VE.
Great.
And that's my pitch about rating systems, and just I wanted to provide some different options for you guys to consider resiliency.
Thank you. This was really great. Personally, I had less knowledge about Living Building Challenge, and it was really interesting to hear about that. So we're going to open up for about 10-ish minutes of questions and save about 5 for any committee updates. Looks like Laura, you have one if you want to go ahead.
Well, it seems like, I know, excuse me, Paul and the Green Building and the Passive House group just finished Revive. I don't know if you're familiar, but that has a lot of the similar resiliency issues being brought to the forefront.
Yeah.
Do you see a lot of alignment across those things? And is Living Future and looking at the resiliency issue as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Passive House, by virtue of the design principles that they are embedding, lend itself directly to resiliency. I often tell people, we're going for LEED or we're going for LBC, some like the ones that I was kind of focusing on, because I would say those are the more popular ones that I see clients asking for. But I usually say, well, if you implement some Passive House principles, then this will lead you to success for your energy, right? It'll lead you to success for all these different things. So I think the Passive House principles absolutely are actually going to be hypercritical, especially as we move towards all these different raised thresholds for energy performance. You're going to have to start thinking about these different principles, Laura. Yeah. And then you asked about well is less so thinking about resiliency. They're thinking about human resiliency. So they want your workplace, essentially a lot of workplaces that are going for well, they want your occupants to be resilient. So they're prioritizing mental health offerings. They're prioritizing having access to healthy food and exercise, and like I just said, mental health. So it's a little bit more about the people, which is the people are the ones using our buildings, so that's really important, but it's a little bit less in our control in some ways as designers.
Great. Are there other questions anyone wants to bring up? I'd be curious to know, are there any, and I should probably know this, are there any Living Building Challenges buildings in the area that have kind of completed some of these resiliency standards, do you know?
Oh, that's a great question. Wait, I think I saw Scott Kelly is on the phone. There's a number of Living Building Challenge projects that our office has worked on, and I know Scott wants to talk to you all about it.
Yeah, there are a bunch. The closest one that we did was up in Muhlenberg College. That was an LBC core. That was the first one in the world. We did one in the Washington, D.C. area that looked deeply at those resiliency strategies. That's called CAFRITS. And there was one that achieved part of Living Building Challenge at Temple University. It's called Temple University Tiny House. I think a bunch of people in the community have done some tours of it. There are a bunch of them, and Living Building Challenge is clearly still evolving. As it's gotten more rigorous, now we're looking at providing, as Grace was talking about, food for 75 or 100 people in the buildings as well. Don't be afraid of that. It's not that hard. When you actually go through the math, it's absolutely manageable. And things like the water resiliency, Muhlenberg College, we had enough drinking water for like 10,000 man days in that building.
Yeah, I know, Kieran. I had a bunch of hidden slides where I was going to show some images about Muhlenberg and the Fahey building, Commons building in Muhlenberg, and I was, for interest of time, I took some of them out. But yeah, that's our most recent one that is pretty exciting.
That's great. Yeah.
Scott, can people come and visit go to Muhlenberg's campus and see it if they wanted to?
Yeah, but yes, absolutely. And
it's active college campus, though, so everyone be smart about it.
Yeah, the people who worked on that project give regular tours. If you want to just send Grace or me an email, The next time we go up to give a tour for somebody, we'll just have you on to the end and you can come join.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Are there other questions?
The one thing I like stopped sharing, Karen, a little too early for myself, but like is like I was just saying, whatever you think about any different rating system, I still would encourage you to use the free resources that are available to you. So like I was just saying, LEED version 5 is fully free, the whole reference guide, and it has a lot of good stuff in there, and you can kind of just take yourself to wherever is important. And the ones that I would say that you could spend some time really on is the Resilient Spaces credit and the Enhanced Resilience Site Design. Those are really dense. I almost made a whole presentation just on one of those credits. I had to stop myself. So check those